Today I'm going to talk through a couple of techniques and possibly some compositional ideas that when combined will make painting watercolour that little bit easier. I'm using a block of cotton paper, it's 9 by 12, and I'll just run you through the colours on my palette. I've got some Payne's grey, Ultramarine, Cobalt blue, and some cerulean there, alizarin crimson, permanent magenta, light red, Indian yellow, Hansa yellow, and down there I've got some raw sienna, burnt sienna, and Viridian. Now I may or may not use them all. I mean, probably just keep it simple, limited palette. Not sure what I'm going to do really at the moment yet, but I'll just start by wetting the paper. It's just some clean water. And I'll bring that about 2/3 of the way down, and I'll start with the sky. I don't want it to run all the way down to the bottom though, so that's why I just wet it 2/3. Not sure if you can see on the camera, it's quite wet because I want the paint to move about. So the first technique I'll talk about is wetting to wet, or wet on wet, wet in wet, whatever you want to call it. And it's a great technique for painting skies. I'm sure most of you already know that, but I'll just run you through a nice simple sky. So I've got some cobalt and some ultramarine. It's just mixed with what's on the palette, just to grey it off slightly. And just lay that in, and the board's at about 30 degrees, so the paint should start running down on its own. And I think I'll go for quite an atmospheric sky. Maybe make it look like it's raining. So I've just got some slightly darker paint and just lay that over the top. And just put in some very simple cloud shapes. And I'll just grab some raw sienna, just add a touch of warmth into the sky. I think I want that to be darker still at the top there, so some ultramarine and some burnt sienna. Keep it on the blue side. And just lay that straight over the top of what's already there. And you can see, because of the angle of the board, the paint's starting to run down on its own. But I want it to run a little bit more. I think I want it to look like it's raining, so I'll just give that a quick mist. And that just lubricates the paper up a little bit and just allows the paint to flow. Now obviously that's going to dry lighter, and I want it to be sort of quite stormy look, so I've got some Payne's grey and mixed some burnt sienna into that, and I'll just lay that on top again. Now while it's still wet, I can keep laying paint into that and it shouldn't cause any problems. And just give that another quick mist. And already it's kind of looking like a rain cloud. Now just dry the brush off, and you can see there's a bead formed there, so I'll just mop that up with a thirsty brush. And just squeeze out some of the water again, and then just grab the rest of that bead. I'm just going to put in a copse of trees, and so I've got some burnt sienna, and I'm just add a touch of Viridian to that. And the paper's still slightly damp, so it should diffuse. But just lay that straight in. And that's another idea, is if you're painting trees, it's not necessarily to think of a tree, so to speak, but just try and find a pleasing shape. So you're making a nice composition rather than just a bunch of trees, which can look a touch disjointed. And another compositional idea is I'm kind of mirroring the shape of the cloud above in this line of trees. So it's kind of almost like if you folded the paper together, they'd almost match up. I'm sure there's a technical compositional name for that, but I'm not sure what it is, but just find it sort of quite pleasing if you mirror certain shapes that you've got going on. And I'll just bring that off into the distance. That's just some cobalt blue mixed with what's on the palette. Just grab some more Viridian and some raw sienna, and again, while it's still wet, just put a few areas in just for some variation. So it's all still wet on wet at this stage. And now I'll start to put the area of the land in. Now I want to leave a touch of lighter paint at the bottom of those trees, just to give the impression that there's some light behind there, or maybe like a bit of a misty effect. Now this land area I'm kind of putting in kind of semi-dry brush, leaving a few areas unpainted, and hopefully that'll give the impression that there's some puddles or wet areas on the field, maybe where that storm cloud has passed. And it's just various amounts of Viridian, burnt sienna and raw sienna. They're getting slightly darker and warmer as it comes into the foreground. Just grab some of that grey and mix that in with it all. Again, while it's still wet, I'll just add some shadows on the trees there. I like to try and get as much done as I can really in the first wash. So it's kind of very similar to the controlled wash method that I spoke about a few weeks ago. And that's just going to be some shadow areas on the field. Okay, go darker still with some burnt sienna and ultramarine. And I'll just lay some of that in the foreground. Maybe it's a shadow of a tree that's just off to the left. But it's another compositional idea, is that if it's dark, say in the top right like it is there with the grey cloud, is to kind of mirror that in the bottom left with something dark as well. It kind of adds a balance to the composition. Okay, that's the first wash done, so I'll allow that to dry. Okay, it's fully dry, so I'm going to go back into the dark that I've got left on the palette. I'm just going to strengthen up the shape of these trees. Just using the side of the brush. It's a size 4 or 5 round brush. And again, rather than painting individual trees, I'm just trying to look for a pleasing shape really. And I'll just give that a quick mist, just to try and soften any hard edges. I don't mind a few hard edges, but I don't want too many. And I'll just put in a few simple little trunks. And just bring the shadow across the land. And trying to keep it as one continuous shape really. Just putting in a few more tree trunks. Try not to keep the distance between them the same, so keeping everything kind of irregular. Trying to avoid any symmetry if possible. Okay, just bring a line of shadow off to the left. I'll just soften that there with the tip of my finger. And then putting a tree there on the right, possibly slightly further away, that one, so a bit lighter in tone. And then just give the impression that there's something behind those trees. Or very simply put in everything suggested, nothing stated really. And just bring some of that shadow across the field. And then kind of almost join it up with the foreground shadows. And I'll just strengthen some of that, add a few hard edges in the foreground. Just kind of give a bit of a sense of perspective really. And it acts to push the copse of trees back. Another compositional idea actually I didn't mention, if you see by the copse of trees, I've left the light there. And so if you have a dark next to a light, it actually makes something stand out. So kind of creates a bit of a focal point. Okay, that's the finished painting. You can see I spoke about a few compositional ideas. So dark, if it's dark in top right corner, I have some dark down in the bottom left, create a balanced composition. You can see the way the line of the cloud comes down to the tree, then across from the tree, and then down again with the foreground shadow, creates kind of like a reverse S-shape composition there. Always keeping everything nice and simple. Don't overstate any objects, keep everything very suggested. Well, I hope you liked that video. please give everything a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out in the description of this video there's a link where you can get 10% off art materials at Meeden. Anyway, I'll be back next week with another video, so until then, bye for now.